Roberta,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Elie.
I would like you to introduce yourself. Tell us a bit more what you do. I know you, but people don't.
Yeah.
My audience that don't know you, so.
Yeah. So I'm Roberta Saffles. My background is in psychology, but focus on positive psychology, which means the study of well-being, what makes life worth living. And so since I've been passionate for most of my life or my career about leadership and developing leaders, translating the concepts of positive psychology into leadership, I've learned about a process or a theory called positive leadership, which is my passion. It's what I bring to the workplace.
Okay.
But so a little bit behind, going back a little bit, this is kind of more the recent me, but I've been living across the world for 25 years. I've lived in Europe, I've lived in the US, I've lived on a ship all over the world. I've lived in Lebanon for 5 years, which was amazing, probably one of the best experiences of my life.
Tell us about that.
So it was back in 2000 and I got there 2007.
Okay.
So after Hariri and all of that. And then there was some unrest in the beginning, but then after that, it was a very peaceful time. But one of the thing that I loved the most about it, I think, is the alignment culturally. So my background, I'm Brazilian American, and the Lebanese culture and the Brazilian culture are very similar. And so being in a place where I'm like, wow, I make sense here. People appreciate all my craziness and who I am, and it was so easy to be friends and people were full of life. And I absolutely loved that. So much that I was supposed to be there for 6 months. That was my contract.
And you stayed for 5 years?
And I stayed for 5 years. So that's how much I loved. And then I got married and moved to America.
Okay.
Which was supposed to be 5 years and then turned into 9.
Okay.
And then we moved to Qatar after that.
Nice.
So Qatar has been the home for the last 4 years. So we came in the middle of COVID.
Okay.
And made it a home. Yeah.
Yeah, Qatar is a home for a lot of us.
Yes.
And then once you moved into Qatar, you started this idea of positive leadership and how to introduce it to company. Is it something that you brought in from the States?
No. Okay. So my beginning into leadership development was actually in a nonprofit organization. Okay. I was part of their leadership team for the Latin America region. But my role was to take care of the staff.
Okay.
So the process of well-being and taking care of staff has always been part of who I am and what I bring. But in that experience, I realized I can put out fires all day. I can help people all day. But unless we deal with the systemic issues, and a lot of it coming from leadership approaches, we're not going to solve it. This is just going to be a cycle and it's going to keep happening.
Okay.
And because I'm very vocal, I started offering some of those solutions to our leadership. And they were like, okay, why don't you take that on to not only take care of the people, but develop our leaders so that these are systemic issues are taken care of. So that's when I started to go into coaching and to really go deeper into how do we actually work with the leader to create those environments where everybody thrives. So I did that. So I wasn't based in the US, but working for Latin America. We had 13 different offices across Latin America. So as a VP of leadership development, we had strategies to develop leaders, current leaders, but also upcoming leaders and people that we identify were potential leaders. And the challenge was in a nonprofit, you don't have the pay as an attractive tool. And so we had to be very creative as to how do we engage the people into the process, but also into wanting to stay in the organization and really give all of them, themselves to the cause, right? And then moving to Qatar, I decided at first to just settle my family, and it was COVID. So I was like, well, let's see what happens. And got offered out of the blue a job with Hamad Corporations. Okay. So I worked there for about 2 years, developing leaders, but in the security sector, which was a very interesting experience.
In the security sector?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
the medical security sector, or like in general?
Security for all of the facilities, in and out, for mental health sections, for all of it.
Okay.
So we had over 2,000 staff
Wow.
that we worked with, and I personally worked at developing their managers and their supervisors.
Okay.
So we had about 300 people that we were directly leading and developing. And it was fascinating because you're talking to people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
Even the security guard that comes but has a master's degree or had 3 business back home, right?
Yeah.
Great experience. And then you have the Qatari contingents, the Qataris that are there as well, and how that dynamic of multiculturalism, locals, different levels of motivation. So it was an incredible experience to learn what is the environment here, what is the landscape of organizations in this context. So it was like a school for 2 years, doing that, trying and error, and trying to develop. It was all preparing for the World Cup, for them to be able to deliver a seamless World Cup, which we were able to do. Beautiful. And then after that, I decided to do my master's in positive psychology.
Okay.
But with a focus on how do I use the science of well-being and thriving and performance and bring it into a leadership context.
Okay.
So that's kind of where the positive leadership piece comes in, because in positive psychology, we're looking at, so if you think of life as a spectrum.
So if we want to define positive leadership.
Yeah. So to define positive leadership, you have to kind of step back into what is positive psychology, because that's where it comes from. So the study of positive psychology is the study of what makes life worth living. So if you think about any field, but the medical field and psychology, usually most of the resources in terms of studying it goes into what's wrong and how do we fix it.
Okay.
So positive psychology comes into how do I take somebody that is not having or experiencing psychological issues, but are also not thriving. They're not living their best life. They're not they're not living out to their potential.
Okay, as a reinforcement, or
well, it's studying the elements.
Okay.
What's the difference between this guy that seems to be absolutely amazing and thriving in the same environment that nobody else is thriving? What is happening here that makes this person thrive and the others not? And so in bringing that kind of mindset to organizations, a field called positive organizational scholarship developed, where there is the study of what makes organizations thrive, what differentiates an organization in the same environment, one that does exceptionally well and one that does average. Yeah.
Okay.
Doing okay, but they're not doing exceptionally well. What is here? What is that factor that makes this organization be exceptional? And that study then...
And when they're talking about what makes them exceptional, is it on... I'm asking like the devil's questions.
No,
here.
please do.
Is it like on a financial level, on a staff retention level?
All levels.
All levels.
So not only finances. So we're not looking only who is exceptionally profitable, but who is exceptionally profitable and has high retention, has a fully engaged workforce, and it's just really out the curve.
Okay.
So in positive leadership, we have Dr. Kim Cameron, which is the main researcher when it comes to positive leadership. He talks about positive deviance, which when I think of the word deviance, I think...
has a negative connotation.
Negative. What's wrong? Like deviant is the kid that is not doing well, right? Is the deviant behavior. But what he talks about is that the concept of organizing is trying to bring everybody to the middle. So think of a bell curve.
Okay.
So we usually look at the negative deviance, so those outliers that are on the negative side, and how do I eliminate them, and they're my problem, right? But we rarely look at who are the outliers on the positive side, and what's going on here that is creating those outliers. And organizing in general is a tendency to try to bring everybody to the middle. So let's put everybody in the little curve, and everybody's great. But he started studying what are those outliers on the positive deviant side. How do we study that? How do we understand that? And how do we amplify and multiply that?
So instead of bringing everybody to the middle, let's try to bring as much possible to the positive side.
So we're turning that curve towards the positive side. So we're going to move that bell curve towards more positive. And that is in every aspect. So not just the human side, which a lot of leaders think, oh, you're psychologist, you're going to think about just the people. No, we're talking about how do we leverage the human side to actually deliver the organizational deliverables, the outcome, right? An organization,
on an operational level.
Yes. An organization doesn't exist just to gather people, right? There is a purpose there, hopefully beyond the profit, but there is a purpose there. And some of that purpose is to be a profitable enterprise. So delivering, yes, outstanding financial results, but in the process, also delivering outstanding human relationships, purpose, virtual behavior, right? So it is a fascinating concept because it kind of flips our minds a little bit because it tells us, wait, I don't need to focus on what's wrong. I need to focus on what's right. Hang on, that's not how Mama taught me, right? I grew up with, I got a 9.5. Why didn't you get a 10?
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with, you got a 9.5.
Because the schooling system is an old system, and this is how we've all been trained to think until we go to actually work, and this is like, oh, that's not how life works. I like something that Simon Sinek says about like changing the perspective into the infinite game. Mm-hmm. So when you as a leader start seeing your business timeline as infinite, you start being more positive automatically because what you're doing right now, maybe it's not gonna affect on an infinite level. It's gonna do something short term.
But it will build. You want it to build towards that infinite game, right? You want it to be a part of something much greater. And that is a very important mindset of, hopefully my organization is going to outlive me. Yeah. Hopefully my team is going to outlive me. I always tell people, leaders that I work with leaders from top levels to the security guard, right? Right now my focus is more on the executive level, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But I always tell them, don't be afraid to develop the people under you, because the reality is, some of them will go further than you, and you want that. You want to be that launching pad that launches them beyond. Think about President Obama. Yeah. Somebody led him when he was a youth.
Of course.
If that guy or that lady thought, no, let me keep him under, he can never be better than me. What a waste, right? First, a person of hypotension is not going to stay in that environment.
This is a big culture in corporates where we kind of cage someone with when you're. I'm not. Let me rephrase that. Okay, so a manager sees someone with very high skill set. Okay, and instead of giving them like an open door, like go ahead, they would cage them and benefit from that to their credit. And this happens a lot in a lot of corporations, all markets.
Unfortunately, and it's not just in this region, it's all the world, because it's about the danger of an insecure leader. When an insecure leader is thinking my survival here and not the infinite game, then I'm thinking like, how do I maintain my position here? And then the political games come in.
But how do you change that mindset? Like, it's not something easy to change.
No, it's not easy to change. It has to start with self in terms of, as a leader, what am I afraid of? Okay. Yeah. And as a leader, what I want to be remembered by. Do I want to be remembered by the leader that kept you caged? Okay. Or do I want to be remembered as the person that launched me into who I am? You're going to be remembered, hopefully, one way or another. But I interview a lot of leaders for my research, and it's fascinating to hear the stories of the leaders that they want to actually model. But at the same time, and sometimes even greater rate, there are leaders that are like, what motivates me now is that I don't want to be like that person. Okay, wow. So they have a negative reference point where it's like, that was a terrible experience, and I want to be anything but that. And I always challenge leaders, like, what type of leader do you want to be? Which reference do you want to be? Do you want to be the reference of like, I don't want to be that? Or do you want to be the reference and the person that is going to actually say, that person is the person that invested in me, believed in me, and I am who I am because of that person. And I have a personal experience with that. So in my early 20s, I took on a much bigger role than I should have in terms of level of competency. But I had a lady, and she was maybe 10, 12 years older than me, and she saw my potential, and she spoke potential in me, and she believed in me, and I was like, you're joking, right?
Yeah.
And she always said, you're going to go further than me. And she has an expression to this day she uses. It's just like, may my roof be your ceiling. So may I go this far, and this is your beginning, right? And it was really fun when I could actually hire her to come help me and with a project here in Qatar.
Okay.
And so the roles flipped, flipped and didn't.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, I'm now in the position where I can actually hire her to do a project with me. And hadn't she not invested in me and being that person, I would never have thought of her to be that person to
100%.
do this project with me. So to not think short term, to not think small, to think beyond, to think that the impact we have on those people that are under our leadership, under our responsibility, that this is a much longer term than this particular outcome that we are working on right now, right? So that is the beginning. That's the self. I need to understand, what are my fears? What are the things that are stopping me? Sometimes those fears are not mine. Sometimes the fears are coming from the top. So if I am thinking that if I don't deliver, if my team doesn't deliver this, we're all out, then that fear environment is going to make me controlling.
Yeah, it's the pyramid of
So
corporates.
if I'm not secure in my position as a leader, and that that my leader believes that I can do this and that I'm going to work with this team and we're going to deliver the best we can, I'm going to be playing the small game.
Yeah.
Because I can't do innovation without high tolerance for risk. Because innovation is trying things new they have not done before. So how do I know that I'm going to get the outcomes? But if I'm afraid that if I don't get the outcomes, I'm going to be either fired, or I'm going to get a scolding, or I'm going to be shamed in front of the whole organization.
But high tolerance from risk comes from having failed multiple times before and learned.
And survived.
Yeah.
But if as an organization, I can create those environments where when I have a failure, instead of let's find the scapegoat who's going to be taking all the blame for this.
Give me a name.
Give me a name. To really think, what are we learning from this? Yeah. In this process, what did we do really well as what went wrong? Yeah. And what are we learning? And actually, brave leaders will say to the person that fails, like, you're going to do it again. You're going to do it again because now you know what you need to watch out for. But most leaders say, you're out. Let me give somebody else the chance to do this, right? At that point, that person is ready to do it right because they have just had a major failure that they are learning from.
Yeah.
But the job of a leader at that point is to actually facilitate the learning process rather than finding the scapegoat and the name and the person that is going to receive all the blame so that others don't.
And how do you see the market here in Qatar, in the GCC, about that way of thinking?
It's very young still. Across the world, this is a very different, counterintuitive in many ways.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of resistance. That not from the idea itself, but the practice, right? As a concept, most people are like, yeah, sure, I can see. But when it comes to the reality of the everyday things, then the old systems, the things that I grew up with, those tend to win. So that process is a little bit slower. It's also aligning the organizational practices and policies with what happens on the day-to-day basis. For example, if I say that we have a high tolerance for risks, but I am very generous with my warning letters, contradiction, right? So there's a saying that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. In the end of the day, it's my practice that is going to speak louder. It's not what I say. If I'm seeing if I'm seeing everybody around me receiving warning letters for making a mistake, I'm going to play small because I want to survive.
Yeah.
And so you have to align and you have to work with, okay, what systems do we have in place? What policies do we have in place? What rewards do we have in place? What punishments do we have in place that are going to actually support this process? And what are the things that are going to hinder this process? One thing I do with leaders, especially C-suite, we sit down, okay, we want this culture. We define what culture we want to create. Usually something that they have to create from top down because it doesn't work from the middle or from the bottom. But then I ask them, what are the behaviors that you do that hinder that very thing that you're trying to create? What is it? So try to identify what are the things that you do.
Because it's constant work. Because even if you are the most amazing leaders the bigger the corporation is, the more middle management you'll have, the more bottlenecks you'll have, and there's no way that you personally, on an individual level, to be managing all of these people on a day-to-day. So what's the approach to spread that positive leadership across?
Yeah, first you have to start with a very clear model, also from the top, and also that the top has to be very transparent about their process of change and learning.
Okay.
So it needs to be a transparent process of when I mess up, say, hey guys, I know we've been talking about creating a positive environment, and I did this and I messed it up because this is it's counter the thing that I'm trying to create. To have the humbleness to apologize and to say from here onward, that's what I'm going to do. This needs to be modeled from the top. So the buy-in from the top is key. And then to be on the lookout for those behaviors at the next level. So as a top leader, when I think about performance reviews, I need to incorporate those cultural pieces. So thinking about, for example, one thing that when leaders want a short cut as to how do I lead well? Okay. There is a questionnaire from Gallup organization on engagement, and it's 12 questions. Those 12 questions, very simple questions. One of them is, do I get to do what I'm best at every day? Do I have a best friend at work? What happens when I make a mistake? So the simple questions, but that's what they use to check the level of engagement of the organization.
I understand the flow, yeah.
So as a leader, if I take that questionnaire and say, okay, what am I doing to encourage somebody in my team to do their best, what they're best at every day? How am I setting up their daily flow or their job description so that they get to do what they're best at every day? What am I doing as a leader to encourage people to actually have relationships and friendships within the organization? Because a lot of people think you can have friends in the organization, but that research is very clear that unless you have relationships, real relationships, you're not going to be as engaged. So I'll go through those questions as like a self-performance review. Like, am I doing those things? Am I intentionally creating those environments that will create the yes answer to those answers, to those questions. And so it's as a top leader, you need to do that with your people and then encourage them and check on them. Are they doing that with their people? If there is no accountability, it won't happen. So you have to keep the accountability for the things that are important to you. What get measured grows. So if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't grow. And that is the same in the cultural piece. It's just we have a hard time defining.
It's hard to measure and it's hard to define.
Yeah, because those behaviors are very abstract, right?
Yeah. Plus, I don't think we're taught to do that at all. Even on a business level within the region, it's a lot of family businesses, family oriented, that grew in the last maybe 25 years. So, and now the younger generation is the one taking the leadership of these corporations, and they want to do change. They see the old model of running a business, the old model of managing people, and they want to do that change. So I think this is why you
I mean, part of what I do is to go into an organization and identify what are their values, the real ones, not the ones that are on the wall. Yeah, because they tend to be different. What are their real values?
Not the ones written by ChatGPT.
No, the ones from ChatGPT that they put, in big poster letters all across, even in the bathroom stall. Yeah. Not those, but the real ones. What are the things that we reward? What are the things we celebrate? What are the stories that get talked about? The stories that get talked about are very, very interesting. And now, if you study those stories, the hero stories of the organization, you're going to see what's valued in that organization. Okay. And then if they are not the values that you want, then you have to do a backwards process. What is the value that we want to actually spread through the organization? And how do we then quantify those? So it's a lot of humanities research of we actually get to quantify behavior and get to actually get people to measure some of those things that feel abstract, especially people more on the technical side, right? It's hard to quantify, but it's possible. And then, so thinking of family business is one of the things that we do, and we have a partner in Dubai that has done that a lot, where they go and meet with the family members. Okay. And they hear those stories. And they hear what are those values, because sometimes they have very successful businesses, but they're not proud of it. Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of money, but when it comes to reputation and honor, which is very important in this region, is not necessarily something they're very proud of. So how do you transform that organizational culture to be something that family feels proud to have their name attached to that business? And then looking into what are the practices that we need to display as leaders, as family members and leaders from the family that are passing on this legacy and this heritage, and what are the things we need to do to make sure that every single person in this business embraces those values and lives out those values. But then goes back to, what are we rewarding? What stories are we telling? What are we punishing? What are we not tolerating? Yeah, those things will tell people what the culture and the values are. I
love what you said, what are we not tolerating? Because when we talk about positive leadership, for the people that don't know exactly what it is, it looks as if it's happy.
Pollyanna, let's just put a very beautiful those flower
awards
cafes,
all the time to everyone. Yeah, and it's not that.
No,
it's being positive. But when there's a business decision that needs to be made with empathy, I think.
Yeah, and also, so I love this story. There's a hospital in the U.S. that won Best Place to Work for many years, and hospitals in general are not usually best place to work. They're usually very on the stressful, lower end. Yeah. But it was a very interesting story because they had an incredible CEO, but they were not doing well financially. So the board decided to remove the CEO, put somebody else in. The whole staff hated it, and they really did not like that process. But the board was like, we need to be sustainable financially, and he's not taking us there. So he got removed. The staff basically advocated for him to come back. So long story, the new CEO made lots of changes people were not happy with, but staff loved that CEO so much that they were able to bring him back. Okay. So he came back, but he came back with a mandate to cut 1/3 of the staff, the very staff that brought him back in. Okay. So imagine that challenge of wow, the very people that advocated for me to come back in are some of the people I'm going to have to fire. He did that in such a way that everybody was on board with that process, because he had empathy with the people, because he worked with each individual as to actually connecting with them in a human level, even though he had to bring in the difficult news that they were going to be let go. The problem I see in a lot of leaders is they think that because they can't do the nice thing, then they can't show empathy. And those two things are separate things.
100%.
So if you have a staff that keeps coming in late because, I don't know, there's a sick mother at home, single parent, whatever, right?
Third grandma died.
Well, there's that too. But there are some things that are like, they're real.
Yeah.
But you do need an operation to run. I can't always be okay with somebody showing up an hour late every day. It's not good for the culture. You tolerate a few times, but you can't. So that's not sustainable, even though you understand the context, you know? And so saying, hey, I know it's tough. I know it's a lot going on, a lot for you to carry. The last thing I want for you to actually have to worry about is a salary deduction. What do we need to put in place to make sure that you're here on time? Because I know there's a lot going on already at home. I know you're managing all the things, and we want to support you. We love you. We care for you. We genuinely have an interest in you. How can we make that happen together? So in that point, it's not a confrontation. Is now you're still gonna have to show up on time.
Yeah.
But how do we do this together? What do we need to have in place? How can we brainstorm ideas of how do you make that happen? And so I can show empathy and still draw the line. It's like, I need you to show up, right?
Do you involve HR a lot?
When the organization, if it is a bigger consulting program, then HR is number one. I have to work very, very closely with them, because they are the ones that are going to implement some of these, and they're also the ones that are usually in charge of performance reviews and all that.
Yeah, why I'm asking this is because a lot of the stuff that I see across organizations here in the GCC is that the tough decisions from managerial positions gets deflected to HR a lot of the times. And from my point of view, I don't like that. I prefer that if I had someone in management, you have to fill in your shoes, okay, and then after this is done, yes, you can deflect it back to HR. But I've seen it here in a lot of organizations that it's happening, and as you said, maybe because the market is still young, and so what are we planning? Yeah.
I mean, I have a very interesting story from the research that I thought it was fascinating. I had a leader that told me he couldn't be friends with his staff. And I asked why. I was like, because they are going to feel free to ask me for things that I'm not going to be able to give them or don't want to give them, and I'm going to have to say no. So by keeping them at a distance, they won't feel free to ask me for things, and therefore I don't have to say no. Which I thought it was fascinating, because it's like my inability to put limits and say no is the way I cope with that is I put everybody everybody at a distance. Everybody's afraid of me, so therefore nobody feels free to put me in that place of discomfort.
But this is happening a lot.
A lot. Yeah. That's why you reminded me.
It's a cultural thing, I think as well, and it's something that we hear a lot, like staff management. You cannot be friends with them, and it just feeds into the insecurity of the manager. That's it.
Yeah, and I think it's that fear of if I bring in what I need to bring in terms of policies, in terms of the way things need to happen, I'm going to break the relationship. Yeah. And so some choose to not have a relationship at all, rather than, or the other fear that I hear a lot is they're not going to respect me. Which again, I don't know what type of friendship that is or relationship that is, because my friends respect me. Yeah. So therefore, it's working on how do you establish relationships and friendships and genuine relationships. You don't need to be BFFs with your staff, but you do need to care for them, and they can sense that you care or you don't care. We human beings, we are very good at picking that up.
We're social animals.
Yeah.
So.
And we know when it's genuine and when it's just out, blab. Yeah. We know, because we can read our micro expressions, and I look at you and I know if you care or if you don't care, right? 100%. I might not be able to tell you. I might not be able to tell you why I think you don't care. But there is something that I pick up that creates that distrust, right? That I'm like, I'm not quite sure where I'm at with you. It's the same. So with leaders, if you genuinely care, and you have demonstrated that throughout, then having those tough conversations are going to be much easier, actually, instead of much harder. But if I've always kept people at a distance to protect myself, because it usually is the self-protective piece. And that's why I love to work with leaders, because when we develop the leaders, then it's like domino effect. If the leader is secure, if the leader knows how to create those environments, what hinders and what helps, then the rest is much easier because it's a domino effect. And also the leader is very in tune to what behaviors I should not tolerate. For example, gossip, right? I want a healthy environment in my organization where everybody collaborates. If I hear gossip and I do nothing about it, what am I telling the people?
Or participate.
Which is worse. But even if I just hear and I do nothing, I don't intervene.
Yeah.
What am I saying?
That this is allowed.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I participate, then I want it, right? Or leaders I hear that a lot. It's like, I have a spy. And they will tell me with great, I know everything that's happening.
I have spies.
See? But what does that do? That creates mistrust between the people.
Yeah.
Because then I don't know who's the spy.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I can trust you. And do I want to know what's happening? Sure. But I want to know what's happening from a healthy perspective, not from who do I place where.
100%.
And how, because the spy ended up having a lot of manipulative power over the leader because they know how to work the leader. And so they create those alliances. And you created a whole political system within an organization where you should have a collaborative space.
We've had this issue maybe 5 years ago of having a lot of like groups and within the company. And when I figured it out, it took us around 2 years to get out of it. It was horrible.
Yeah.
It took 2 years, 2 complete years, like to get out of it and restart, rebuild, redo the whole thing.
Because rebuilding trust takes a lot more work once it's broken, or if the environment has not allowed for trust to be there from the beginning, right? So that's why it's very important that a leader is the person that is taking care of that culture. And what are the things I want to have that savvy insight of, what does this behavior lead towards?
Yeah. But it's not easy as a leader, especially, I'll talk about myself. Like I started, I've never managed people before. You know, I'm a guy that used to do web development, okay?
Yeah, and usually even in business schools, they don't teach you to lead.
Yeah,
at least the people side. Yeah. They will teach you to lead the business side.
But even if you when you learn something on paper and then you're actually paying for it out of your pocket and you're losing here, you're losing there, making here, it's not easy to be. It took me a lot of time. Maybe it took me years to understand how to stop micromanaging, how to trust people, how to delegate, and all of that. And we don't have the culture of, you know what, maybe I should ask someone for help because this is not an Arab thing. No, I think.
Yeah. No, I had the best story about that. I had an assistant, and he at Hamad, where he came. He was a former general at an army in another country, and he came as a security guard.
Okay.
But as I talked to him, I'm like, there's incredible potential, a lot of experience here. Let me pull him in to help me with leadership development, because as a man, older, let's leverage aspects of culture that he can do that I, as a woman from Brazil, cannot do, right? But I had my team, him and somebody else, work on developing a program for leadership, and I gave them 3 weeks. And I told them what the deliverables were and where the resources were, how to access the resources, what I wanted. Kind of, in my mind, did the best job at delegating. Kept checking in with them throughout. We had scheduled time for when they were going to present the project. Kept checking how things go. Yeah, we're good with this. We're working on this chapter and that, module. I'm like, great, it's coming. The day of the meeting comes. And they come, and I was like, so excited. I want to see what you guys put together. So, we couldn't access the intranet, and therefore we never got the resources you set out for us. And so we couldn't finish. And I'm like, excuse me?
What?
What? Yeah. And I said, why didn't you tell me in the last 3 weeks that you couldn't access the intranet to access the resources I've set out for you there to do this? Well, I thought I was going to be able to figure it out. And I was like, did you? No. I was like, then? So it was very clear, a cultural thing, because as an older man from an incredible experience, he couldn't come to me to say, Roberta, I have this issue that feels very basic.
Yeah.
That I should know how to solve it, but I have not been able to. So he rather pretend everything was going great until the deadline.
Yeah.
And it just blew me away. And I fixed it in one email. I sent one email and it was done. But it helped me learn that depending on the culture that you have, the age, you have to lead people differently. I can't have one size fits all. If I'm leading a university grad that just came out of university and is from an European background, has traveled the world, very different than I'm going to lead this guy, this former general of an army that worked with the king of his country. Yeah. Very different approach. It's not the same approach. It can't be.
At all.
And so sometimes we think, I have to be fair as a leader. But I'm like, is fairness really equity? Yes. I need to give them both the resources, the support to do the best work they need to do. But if I treat them exactly the same, they're not going to be able to give me the same. Like they don't have the same resources to be able to deliver to the same degree. So I have to adapt as a leader. The job of a leader is a difficult one.
It's very difficult.
Very difficult, yeah. No wonder the new generation don't want leadership roles. Nope. They really don't. They're like, no, leave me alone. Let me do my thing. I'm happy where I am. I don't want that headache.
How was the summit?
The summit was amazing. Amazing. So I'm assuming people don't know about the summit.
Tell us a bit more.
So
how did you come up with it? What's the idea behind it? What's the future plans for it?
Yeah. So the summit was an initiative that was birthed out of the research that I did here in Qatar. So going back a little bit, I was doing my master's in positive psychology with a focus on positive leadership. And I was always been very curious about here in Qatar, how come in such a short amount of time, Qatar has become the country has become. And to be honest, a lot of the things that I heard about Qatari leaders were very critical, very negative. And to me, that didn't feel like the full story.
Because you've seen what has
Because
been
I look around and I'm like, it can't be possible that all of this that you're describing to me is a full story. There has to be another side to this. Yeah. But there was no place to access it. Like I looked at the research, I looked at, all of the information and resources I could find, and there was nothing talking about what are the positive traits of Qatari leaders? What are the positive attributes of Qatari leaders? Can I guess? Sure. I can see in my own experience, and I could see some positive things. There's some things that were branding of the country. The country is very good at that. So I'm like, how much is reality? How much is branding? So we need to kind of really understand. And I'm very curious. So I decided to do my research on the positive attributes of Qatari leadership, which most people go, what?
Yeah.
But I realized it's like, I cannot rely on the description of others that are looking at this culture with critical lenses without fully understanding. I need to hear from them. What do they see as their positive attributes and the reasons why they do what they do? And so I set out to do that, and it was a fascinating experience because I got to talk to incredible people, and unearth some things that I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. So I talked to a former CEO of what was QTEL before Rodito. And he was telling me how he transitioned the old organization into a new organization and how he was able to change people around different roles within the organization and get out of that system in which you had all those family relationships and tribal relationships holding people to those positions. And he talked about he brought in a consulting firm that what they did was to basically go and map out the skills and abilities of everybody in the organization. And then they create a new organizational structure.
Okay.
And everybody needed to apply to
again,
but they had 3 options. They could apply to 3 different jobs that would, in their mind, would best match their abilities. They had access to their abilities and the 3 jobs that they felt best matched that. And so in that process, I thought it was brilliant because it was like, you now got the relational part out, because it's not about who's about, we measure your abilities. They're here, and you get to choose which job you want to apply. And some applied to their own jobs. Yeah. And it turned out they were not the best applicant. And, a lot of people found other places in the organization, but some people didn't. And that was up to them, because that depended on where. The idea is that there will be a place for you if you apply to the right job.
Yeah.
But then they ended up applying for jobs that had nothing to do with their abilities, and they didn't get hired. So they got out a lot of people because of that. And then they were able to unearth a lot of this talent that was hidden underneath. Yeah. Remember the idea of caged. Let me cage everybody in so that I don't look bad. They were able to unearth and raise up an incredible team of leaders that were already there. Okay. But they couldn't see it.
That's beautiful.
And I was like, wow, that is amazing, because it's like such a savvy way of not confronting the culture, not bringing in a model from the West that doesn't work in this environment, but trying to figure out, how do we do this in a way that helps everybody save face and does not affect the relational pieces. Of course, there were people that were not happy.
Of course.
That's normal. But as a whole, you're seeing people, So all of that, I love that story. There are many, many incredible stories from the research. But I did the research, I wrote the paper, and it's archived in the University of Pennsylvania somewhere.
Okay.
And I was like, what's the use of that? It's like 80 pages, nobody's going to read. Even if they go out and try to download it, they're not going to read it. 80 pages long. And I was like, how do we actually amplify? How do we help create a system in which we develop leaders based on the things that are culturally celebrated, that are easy wins, but that helps people really stand out in their leadership approach. So I'm not trying to make you a completely different person that is a model from a different cultural perspective. I'm trying to build you into the best models of Qatari leaders that we've found. Okay. And how do we develop and look up to them? Not to me, not to Elon Musk, but to the guy in your own context that shares similar values, similar background, that are doing incredible work. And I was like, but that hidden in the paper, it's not going to do it. It's not going to read it. So I was like, in talking to some of the people I interviewed, they were like, we need to make this public. We need to bring this out. And that sense of pride of like, why are you studying what's right? It's like, well, because I want to know what is right so that we can amplify and multiply. And so we decided to do the Leadership Summit. And we wanted to really actually talk about it and then identify those values and help in the conversation of the summit. How do we embrace those values within the different organizations? Because the organizations are not only Qatari, most of them are very mixed. But how do we actually celebrate those values, leverage them in a multicultural context towards a future of leadership in Qatar? So we had amazing speakers that were talking about strengths in leadership, loving leadership. We're talking about putting people first. So we had Fatima Kouardi, we have Hamid Al-Hajri from SNUNU, Fatima from Uridu. We had His Excellency Abdulaziz Al-Thani that came and talked leadership and love. We had panels that were talking about how do we take those values from our heritage and actually bring them into really practical ways of leading. So bridging the past and the future. And then we had people that are in those different organizations, HR or leaders and founders, that were talking about how do we then transform this into leading the next generation. And then, of course, I brought in the research, what it was, what we found, and how do we then use it from here onward. So that was a fun kick out. We had like full house, more people than we could actually sit. It was actually interesting seeing the VIPs come in and there was no more VIP sitting. They would go out. It was a great problem to have. But so the next, we're creating a community of people that are wanting to embrace the idea of creating those environments for thriving. So whatever position you have in an organization, but that you're like, I want to be an advocate for really working with my organization to create thriving environment. So, and then in those conversations, talk about practical tools, changes that are going to be hard to implement, but that are necessary. And then we want to have, quarterly encounters where we're going to expand that conversation a bit more. And then every year, bring in who is practicing this. So go back to that appreciative thing of like, who's doing this well, that positive outlier, the deviant, who's doing that well? What do we learn from them?
A knowledge hub about positive leadership.
Yeah, but not just theoretical knowledge. I want the actual application. So one of the reasons I had Fatima Kouari there, she's head of HR for Urido Group.
Okay.
She's implementing this at a large scale around the world, not just in Qatar. Yeah. And so I wanted to hear from her, like, what are those practices? How do you do this at a large scale? Like some of the questions you were asking earlier. And to hear some of those practical steps. For example, one of the things she said was their EQ course for leaders is not a 2-day training. It's a 1-year course because those things take time. It
takes time.
You don't learn emotional intelligence in 2 days, right? 100%. So you have to, if you really are invested in creating and becoming the organization where people thrive.
There's a lot of training, a lot of workshops.
And to create that environment that leaders are not only saying, I'm learning, but I can see that everybody's learning.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not the only one point out here, like some organizations say, you need coaching because I need to fix you, right? No, everybody's is in that spot where we're all learning, we're all growing, we're all wrestling with this and we're trying to figure it out and to normalize some of that process.
Yeah, I think also for larger corporations, it's easy to invest in that kind of coaching, workshops, all of that. For, let's say, a lot of the SMEs, this is it's not an easy thing to invest to, especially when they're in like survival mode. Mm-hmm. But they have a great leader. So how do you bridge like this gap between being on a survival mode kind of thing and
great question, yeah,
having positive leadership?
So there is so Kim Cameron, who studied this very well, he talks about the different pillars of positive leadership. And one of them is to identify your positive energizers. Okay. That might be you as a leader, might not be you. Okay.
It doesn't have to be you.
Doesn't have to be you. You can learn it though.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a book called The Positive Energizer, but it doesn't have to be you, but people can learn it. But instead of thinking, I have to be all things to all people, think about who is naturally that positive deviant person, that person that everybody loves to be around, that everybody feels that when they interact with them, they are more alive, they are better. Who are these people? And how do I enable them to do what they already naturally do, but to actually
on a bigger
fuel
scale.
them, right? So they did that at the University of Michigan, where this research is based. The university, the administration actually came to them and said, how do we do this for us, for our own administrative team? And they recruited 40-something people. And they basically said, once a month, just come up with an idea of something that you think is going to impact the environment positively. Okay. And they were free. And I don't even know if they had a budget or not, but they came up with all sorts of great ideas in how to create those environments. From, a little bit of a kind of a positive chain of like, I'm going to send a note to you and then you have to find somebody else to send a note to kind of thing. Those simple, very simple things, to some more bigger things where, you recognize somebody's positive input. So giving rewards to the things that you actually want to see more of, rather than the higher sales or higher productive, actually the best of the friends or whatever. Yeah. So, but to enable them and give them autonomy, because that's natural to them. They are going to naturally be
100%.
thinking about those things. Very easy to implement, very cheap, but they need the autonomy to do it.
Yeah.
If you don't actually give them autonomy, they will do it at their small scale because they can't help it.
100%.
But you can leverage them. So that is a simple way to do it.
I want to talk a bit about CSR activities, whether it's internal or external. Where does that fit within positive leadership?
It fits because positive leadership is something I haven't talked about, is the idea that the organization is a source of virtue.
Okay.
So virtue in the sense of the best there is. So not because virtue feels very nice and moral and, something for the humanities to talk about, not for me that deal with, the advertising campaign. That is not, my focus. But virtue is, how do we create organizations, teams, environments where the best of that is at display. So if it's an operational team, that is the best in all aspects, not just in one. So in terms of CSR, we talk about social responsibility. And when we talked about positive leadership, we talked about the positive deviance in all aspects, right? Okay. So profit, but also people, well-being of the staff. So how do we create a CSR campaign that is not just a PR thing? It's not just about your public relations, that everybody out there in the world thinks we are great, but everybody inside knows we don't actually care about that.
Because there's something that someone told me a while ago, I'm not sure if this is 100% true, but I'll check it out, is that like publicly listed companies, okay, it's mandatory for them within their budget to have CSR activities.
Mm-hmm. Some of them, yeah.
So it's just like, okay, we have the money, here you go.
We need to spend it somewhere.
Spend it. But it's not like real. Mm-hmm. So
and that's the thing, because if you do it that way, like checklist, we got to spend this budget because we got to be in compliance, then it does not actually create the impact within the organization that you want to create. Okay. So if you think about a virtuous organization, is an organization that is a force for good in the world, so that what you do creates good in the world.
Okay.
Yeah. And that can be in your deliverables, and that can be through your CSR stuff. Right? So am I doing something that makes this world a better world? And how do I do that? And sometimes you need to tap into, okay, I am a leader. I don't actually care about the environment. That's not true, by the way. I do care, but just say an example. I don't care about the environment, all right? But that's the right thing. Sustainability. Let's put something green somewhere. But the reality is my people know I don't care. And so what I'm creating is an internal disconnect. And it's a hypocritical approach where I'm investing all this money when everybody knows I really do not care. Rather, to have a both impact where I'm creating something good in the world, but actually I'm getting my staff to reap the benefit of that involvement, that we are the company that do good in the world. You have to talk about something that either they care about or that it really aligns with the vision and the values of the organization.
So to redefine that. So if the leader doesn't care about it, let's say, okay, find something that the majority of the staff cares about and invest in that.
Invest in that because they are already passionate about, and they will want to be aligned with a company that is doing the good in the world that they wish they could have do in a larger scale. So if I care about inclusivity, if I care about helping people with disabilities and special needs, then you have a group of people in the organization that are very passionate about that. Yeah. Give them the autonomy to run with it. They will feel incredibly empowered. They will feel very engaged and motivated. And that passion is going to spread, right? True. Rather than you trying to come up with what is the one thing that should be the best PR stand up for us, right? Yeah. That people can see through that, and especially internally. And so you're going to do more damage internally.
It's first internally, yeah.
Yeah, because they're going to see that is not true. And I talk about the internal CSR because sometimes, because it's a checklist, then I have a very toxic environment with zero social responsibility. Yeah. I pay my people terribly. They have no flexibility. I have no empathy. But here I am, seen in the world out there as the most socially responsible company. Not really integrity, is it?
Yeah.
I'm not living out the thing that I'm talking about out there, and that is very important in a virtuous organization. So I'm not saying a virtuous organization just so that's the moral thing to do as human beings. Let's be good people. I'm talking about all of this because the research is very, very, very clear about the organizations that focus on being a force for good in the world, the organizations that build thriving working environments, that really create environments where people can really bring in their best. They get the results. They get the organizational outcomes. But sometimes because we don't know how, we just put that out the window. But I don't want to give people the impression that we are talking about this from just a moral standpoint. Yes, definitely. Ethically, we should be doing those.
But practically as well.
But even if you are a jerk and you don't care about humans, money-wise, it's going to pay off.
Yeah.
Well-being pays off big time.
Because you as a leader by yourself, you can't do anything. You need your whole team. They're the driving force behind the business.
And the more you want to attract talent and retain talent, the more you need to pay attention to that.
100%. And retaining talent is not an easy thing to do right now.
No.
Plus, it's the having like a, let's say, big turnover in talent as well is very costly for businesses. And especially in the GCC, I've seen that a lot. Maybe also more in Saudi Arabia because there's a huge market boom right now. So the opportunities are big, and for you to keep Gen Z, millennials within your organization, you need to do something totally different than others. Have you faced any of these like challenges within someone you're working with?
Yeah. So one of the metrics when I started working with an organization here in Qatar, one of their metrics was their average span of employment was 11 months.
Okay.
Very low. Yeah. And I mean, creative. So you have a naturally shorter lifespan of the employee, but 11 months is it's like you just got them started.
Because especially here, like in Qatar, 6 months is your probation period.
Yeah. So it's like, what's happening here that is not about, it's about like, why are people leaving? Yeah. And a lot of leaders I talk to, well, it's just the nature of Qatar. It's a transient place. I'm like, I don't think so. I don't buy into that because there are people that have been here for 10 years, 15 years.
Yeah.
If we study what's right, let's study them, what makes them stay, right? And then we started implementing some of these principles. We started looking at what is right. So I went in and talked to every top leader, so every head of department and every C-level, and did an appreciative interview where I mapped out what was right with them individually. What did they bring to the table? Because I wanted to know, what resources do we have? What are we working with here? What currency do I have to actually create positive environments here? And then we had them do a strengths assessment where they not only talked to me about it, but we mapped it out and we identified what are the strengths and the tendencies of the organization. And then we looked at, okay, this is who we want to become as an organization. This is our goal, our vision. Okay, in order to get there, what do we have that is here already that is going to take us there, and we just need to channel? What is missing here that we need to actually bring in? Not to try to make these people something they're not, but to try to say, who are we missing? What type of skills and strengths are we missing? And how do we bring them into this pot in order to create that? And within about a year, we are already changing to 24 months.
Wow.
So it's a very short amount of time. Wow. But I think just having the conversation, people start seeing that even if you haven't got it figured out, we're trying. Does that make sense?
I love that. I love that.
They see we're trying. We're trying to create an environment where everybody's thriving. And of course, that's not the only thing, right? There were other factors, and we worked with the HR team to bring in. So it's a more holistic approach. But those things, and you see such a change in such a short amount of time, is incredible. So again, as I say, it pays off on the financial side, not just. But the leaders got to be willing to unlearn some things and learn some new things.
I love that. If we want to end this with a last question, what's next for Roberta?
So my goal, my hope, let me see, do I do this in a small scale or the big scale?
Big scale.
So, yeah, big scale. Big scale. So one of the things that I think, and this is major, big scale, like 10-year dream. One of the things that I see in Qatar specifically, but in the GCC as rentier states, we call them, right? People, a lot of foreigners coming in as workforces, is there is this crisis to a degree where, it's like, I call it a crisis of mattering, where...
A crisis of mattering?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's going to be a long answer, sorry.
It's okay.
As all my answers. Yeah. But a crisis of mattering in the positive psychology world is, I feel that I matter when I both add value and I feel valued. It needs to have both. If it's just one, I don't feel that I matter. And then there is a personal scale where I value myself and I feel that I'm valuable. But then there is like a communal space in where I add value to this community and the community values me, right? But then in Qatar and the rentier states in general, UAE is changing that a little bit. It's like, it's a very transactional relationship because you don't have the ability to fully embrace the country as your own.
Yeah. So
you're always in a transactional relationship. You give me this, I'll give you that. I know
you're always an expat.
And I know my time here has a deadline. If it's not forced by my employer, it's going to be forced by my age, right? And you are in this limbo of survival, of like, if my employer fires me, then it's not just me, it's me and my family have to go somewhere else, right? That creates that uncertainty and insecurity that I don't think is conducive to that confidence that we need in order for leaders to fully embrace creating a healthy environment. Okay. So that's a challenge. So all of that to give you context to my dream. So my dream. So in positive psychology, we have something called the Appreciative Inquiry Summit, which is, we talk about change management. That is the fastest way to create massive change. So Appreciative Inquiry Summit is when you, as an organization, as a country, or the UN has done this, you bring in all the stakeholders into the space for 2 days. And you, internal and external. Okay. So you're talking about your clients, your service providers, the people that will resource you with your materials. Everybody comes in and you're kind of in tables, big hall, imagine big hall. Every stakeholder type is in different tables. And you're talking about a big question. So my question in Qatar would be, how do we create a community where everybody matters? And bring in government, private organizations, expats, labor forces, everybody in the room, and talk about how can we create a community where everybody matters?
I love that.
And then we first start by dreaming big, what that look like. And then we talk about what are the strengths that are already there? What do we have that helps us already create that dream? And then we design the dream together. So at that point, it's not the government that's going to take that on. It's not the director of the company. Every stakeholder is going to take their piece of creating that reality. So if I am a supplier for you, and I believe in this dream of creating this reality with you, as a supplier, this is what I can do. And I'm going to bring my effort to the table. And you're going to bring your effort to the table, and everybody brings their effort into the table. And then private sector, if I think about Qatar, right? Where we can create that society where everybody matters. So major, like, moonshot dream.
It's a beautiful dream.
It's a beautiful dream. I hope that I can be a catalyst for it. I don't expect myself to be the one person that carries it, because it's massively big. But
with everything that you're doing, I think you will be.
I want to be a catalyst. I want to start. I want to ignite the direction. And again, not because, I believe morally and ethically we should embrace it. But even if not, strategically.
It's a massive win for everyone.
For everybody. You can't have just a fraction of the society thrive. That doesn't work. We are system. We are ecosystem people, and that's how we are as human beings. We are interconnected. So I can't thrive if you're not thriving, not fully. So
100%.
we have to create those environments for all. So in a large scale, that's what I hope to do one day. On a small scale is, what can I do today that I wished I could do for the whole? So how can I go into an environment, an organization, an individual, a team? So in my team coaching, in my organizational consulting, how can I help create that at that level so that then we can start creating those bubbles of virtuousness, of actually positive, good force for the world, positive change, and be a catalyst for that ripple effect of change. So that,
That's amazing.
Short answer, no. I always give long answers, but that's me.
Roberta, thank you very much. That was an amazing conversation.
Thank you, Elie. It was a pleasure. It's always a joy. Thank you so much.